We haven't done a quick pick Shabbat in a while, and I see some people here who may not have been to a quick pick Shabbat before and don't know what this is. Sermons are from the church. A priest gives a sermon, a minister gives a sermon, but a rabbi gives a shiur. A shiur is more than just a sermon. A shiur delves in a deeper way into some of the interesting topics and themes that are relevant either to the day or to the parsha of the week, or maybe the season in the calendar. And if I gave a shiur every Shabbat, it would be too much. So, too much quantity and quality. Too long a shiur, but Quick Pick Shabbat gives us a little bit more space to delve deeper into the sources and to also maybe answer some questions, which are always the most interesting part for me about the topic that we're learning. Today's shiur comes directly from the parsha that we read this morning. It's going to be on non-marital sex and concubines. And we are introduced to some concubines at the end of this week's parsha, just as we are introduced, by the way, to concubines in the last two parshas that were read. When I learned Parashat Lech Lecha, one of the first parshas that you read when you're young, I don't think it's fully explained to us in grade 1 or 2 or 3 what a concubine is. I don't remember anyone asking the question, or any teacher even asking or offering an explanation. As I grew up, I started asking more about these women who appear in many, many different places in the Bible and what the nature is of their relationship. Who is the most famous concubine at the beginning of the Torah? Hagar. What is Hagar's role in the story? And I think this helps us understand how, at least in ancient Israel, how concubines were perceived. What crucial role does she play in Abraham's family life? Right. Hagar, it seems, and I didn't bring this as a source, Hagar is almost invited into the family by Sarah. And Sarah needs her because Sarah is infertile. She conceives a son, Ishmael, and then the whole story on the first day of Rosh Hashanah is the story of the banishing of Ishmael and Hagar. Why are they banished? Why are they banished? Well, it's not clear, but we know who's responsible. We know Abraham doesn't want to banish her, but Sarah does. Right? Hagar doesn't know her place, but it's Hagar was brought in by Sarah. It's sort of not fair to Abraham, right? Here's somebody who we're going to become close to, and now you're going to get rid of her. So that's correct. What Chazan Kavari says is, I think, crucial to understanding what a concubine might be in the Parsha and in ancient Israel. A concubine is of a lesser status, there's no question, than a wife. But her child, the child of a concubine, is not of lesser status than the child of a wife. How do we know that? That's why Sarah wants to get rid of him. It's because Ishmael is the firstborn son. And the inheritance, as the Chazan said, passes on in ancient Israel primarily to the Bechor, to the eldest child, either the entire thing or a double portion, but definitely property goes to the older child. And Isaac, now that he was born, would always be second fiddle to the older brother. I don't think all of us really understand that about the story on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, but it's crucial to understand what a concubine is in order to get to the point of the story, and what a concubine is not, right? In some cultures, the children of a concubine are illegitimate children, or the children of a mistress. In other words, they don't have any official status. But definitely in the Bible, they do. And that is pointed out as well in the end of our Parsha. Look at how our Parsha ends. I just gave one verse here on the handout. Abraham gave all that he had unto Isaac, but unto the sons of the concubines that Abraham had. This is the last aliyah from this morning's reading. The sons of the concubines, he gave gifts, and he sent them away from Isaac his son while he yet lived, eastward unto the east country. The sons of the concubines. Who are the concubines? Well, so one suggestion is Keturah. We're introduced to Keturah also at the end of this week's Parsha. But how is Keturah described at the end of Hayyei Sarah? It says, I'll read it for you. V'yosef Avraham vayikach isha ushma Keturah. She is not described in the opening verse of chapter 25 as a concubine. It says, Vayikach Avraham isha. He took a wife. Maybe there's some ambiguity and that word was used for wives and concubines, but most people don't think so. They think Keturah was taken as a wife. It's interesting that when we pray any prayers that have the imahot in them, we understand skipping Hagar, right? But why skip over Keturah? Keturah was Abraham's wife. We don't know why she skipped over if she was therefore, she was a mother to, in a way, to the patriarch of the Jewish people. You could make an argument. You could also make an argument, by the way, for Jacob and his concubines. Zilpah, who was it? Shifra and Zilpah. He also had concubines. We don't pray to them. We don't say Elohei Zilpah Velohei Shifra. They were mothers to some of the 12 tribes. So it's a lesser status, very ambiguous, and it seems like, if you asked me, Abraham had a few that are unnamed. Because there's no other way to understand to me this last verse. He had some concubines. We know Hagar, but I don't think why would this be about Hagar? Hagar was already banished with Ishmael. It seems that in the last years of Abraham's life, and it makes sense because he acquired a lot of money, in the last year of Abraham's life, after his wife died, he took a new wife and some new concubines and had a lot of other kids with them. So right away, when we're talking about the theme of non-marital sex and relations, we have a big problem. If I'm going to take the Catholic approach, which is absolutely no sex outside of marriage at all, I have to justify somehow how the patriarch of Judaism seems to have. Well, we understand polygamy, but this is different than polygamy. These are women of a lesser status in his household with whom he has children, and that he can just banish them away. Right? That's what happens in that verse. Why do you think Abraham banishes away his other kids? But that could be a whole lesson unto itself. You know, this is about Isaac. I once gave a sermon about Isaac and how his father seems a little bit too involved in Isaac's life. Like Isaac almost is a totally passive figure with no ability to protect himself, speak up for himself, to develop his own identity. I mean, Isaac is old at this point, but Abraham in his lifetime is so concerned that his stepchildren will be a challenge to Isaac that he sends them away, right? With gifts. Why do you think the Torah makes it clear that he sent them away with gifts and not with, exactly, Abraham paid them off, you might say, to get out of the way. Go eastward, we don't ever want to see you again, leave. Don't become a challenge to my son after I die, and don't be confused, you are not entitled to any portion of the inheritance. Wouldn't they otherwise be entitled to a portion of the inheritance? Yes, and we know that because, again, Jacob had the two concubines. Their children were entitled to a portion of the inheritance. Hagar was sent away because Ishmael was a challenge to the inheritance, a bigger challenge because he was a firstborn. So that's why the Torah makes this verse very clear. They are not part of the Abrahamic, or I should say the covenantal family. They're part of the Abrahamic family, but God's family, the special family, they were paid off and asked to leave. And this is, this makes sense also because the promise of God to Abraham is that you wouldn't just be the patriarch of the Jewish people, you would be the patriarch of Hamon Goyim. Many, many nations will sprout from you. So how do we understand that? Well, probably through these concubines. So sometimes when this is interpreted by Jewish tradition, when the question is asked, how could Abraham do this? How could he have concubines and how could he banish his children? The response is, special important people have special important rights and privileges that the rest of us don't have. Abraham was an exception to the rule. I don't buy it because there are other examples in the Torah of concubines that are in the families of non-prominent people. And we know, look at the second source, that concubines are very prominent in the royal courts of Israel. He had 700 wives. Who are we talking about in the first book of Kings, chapter 11? Which king? Which one has 700 wives? You know right away. King Solomon. Don't ask me how he managed that. There were 700 wives, princesses. He also had 300 concubines. His wives turned his heart. I don't know if that means all of them turned his heart, including the concubines, but it could be maybe an attack specifically on the fact that these wives were taken for political reasons and not for procreation or for love. Do you understand that? What I'm submitting is that maybe these wives, Solomon took wives from many different places. They were political relationships. And so they came with foreign customs and maybe idolatrous practices. And they were the problem. You might even read in this verse, I wish he would have just stuck with the concubines. Because the concubines had a role to just make him happy, and they could come and go as they pleased. But wives you're stuck with. And you're stuck with 700 of them. They're princesses, right? And you know what they say about Jewish princesses. Yeah. But that maybe they're at fault here for turning Solomon's heart. In other words, I'm reading into this verse a criticism of marriage. And when I advertised this class, I said, why are people talking about non-marital relationships? Because in Judaism, there is actually a long history of marital relationships presenting challenges. What is the biggest challenge in a marital relationship in Judaism? It's not that you can't get out of it, it's that getting out of it can be a nightmare. Right? So one of the things that I do as a rabbi is help people who are navigating how to get out of a marriage, a Jewish marriage. It is one of the most complicated and contentious, potentially, situations that a rabbi has to deal with. A marriage in Judaism cannot be dissolved except by a Beit Din. A rabbinical court must dissolve a marriage, and it cannot be dissolved unless both parties are willing participants. Not everybody wants to get involved in a relationship that ties them to those obligations. And some people have presented this biblical idea. Why not rethink concubines as a model for what a relationship, a consensual, loving relationship could be with a couple, that frees them of some of the burdens that marriage imposes. In order to think about that model, one has to understand what exactly is the difference between a concubine and a wife. So look at the quote from the Talmud on the first page. And David took more concubines and wives in Jerusalem after he came from Hebron. So David also had a lot of concubines and wives. The Talmud says, Lemilui Shmona Asar, these were to complete the tally of 18. David believed, like many of us do, in superstition. And 18, chai. If I have 18 wives and concubines, it'll be of good fortune to me. But here's the important part. My nashim umay pilagshim. What is a wife and what is a pilegesh, a concubine? Rav Yehuda says that Rav says, wives receive a marriage contract and a betrothal. What is a marriage contract? What do we call that colloquially? Ketubah. If you're a wife, you get a ketubah. What is a ketubah? Not a Mickey Mouse one that you see in some marriages. I mean a real ketubah. Saying what? More. It's not that it says you're married. What's the key part of the ketubah? There are obligations in a ketubah, and the most important obligation is if you are left alone for whatever reason, whether it's because I die or because I divorce you, you will inherit part of my estate. You will not be left alone. You have a claim, a legal claim on me. It's interesting, there are some cases today, I'm sure people you know, where, let's say a partner dies young, God forbid, their husband or their spouse or their wife dies young, they have kids, but they've met somebody new, wonderful. But the kids are worried because there are stories out there of new spouses. This is not surprising to any of you. There of new spouses, getting in the way of financial affairs in a family. This happens a lot. And one of the things they'll do is they'll go and see, maybe before the marriage, they go and see a lawyer for a prenup. So this is almost like the roots of a prenup marriage is a marriage that's not a full marriage, a marriage with conditions. And I think that's how Chazal in the Talmud imagined a Pilegesh relationship. It is a marriage, because it says, at least according to Rav, you get Kiddushin. Kiddushin is what happens under the chuppah. There's a wedding, you get a ring. But when you want to end it below ketubah, Pilagshim below ketubah uvelo kiddushin. I'm sorry, I'm already jumping to the next interpretation. There is a dispute as to whether a pilegesh gets a ring under a chuppah or whether she doesn't. Rav's opinion, which is the one cited here, is she doesn't get kiddushin, she doesn't get a ketubah. The main thing he's saying is the marriage can end and no claim can be made on either party. It's interesting to think about that, and where we in our civic life, would actually like that model in certain instances. And there's also the point of not having a ketubah means you don't have to go through a get ceremony. So there's no chance of a woman being left what's called an aguna, chained to her husband, incapable of marrying anybody else because he won't grant her a get. And just another aspect of this to think about, when the question was asked about whether rabbis were permitted to perform same-sex relationships, same-sex marriages, right? A few people brought up the pilegesh. Kiddushin as a ceremony is really about one party claiming exclusivity over the other. I should be more precise. It's about a man claiming exclusivity over a woman. Not the reverse. Why not the reverse? Because according to the Bible, you just saw, men are allowed multiple wives. We're not allowed to perform, don't come to me and ask me to perform a marriage for a second wife. That's not allowed. But if a man takes by accident a second wife, we got a problem. Technically, it is valid. technically it's valid. I'm not getting involved in anyone's personal issues. Technically it's valid, and they would need to have a get. A whole problem. So someone said, why not revive the model of an informal relationship, which has precedence in the Bible and in the Talmud, to create a same-sex ceremony, since Kiddushin would not work for a same-sex couple. Kiddushin is the claiming of exclusivity over another couple, which only works when a man can claim exclusivity over a woman. I hate to talk about marriage like this, because the next time you're going to go to a chuppah ceremony, you're going to say, "Oh my God, what religion are we a part of? This is so archaic." But that is what we're doing up there. The man gives the ring. That's the only ring that matters, and he acquires her. It's not really acquiring in the sense that she's a slave, but he's acquiring exclusivity over her. Right? The word kiddushin, kadosh, special relationship, exclusive relationship. Kadoshim tihiyu, the Torah says, you're going to have an exclusive relationship with God. We're not allowed to worship any other god. In the same way, the wife is not allowed to be with any other man. What's the penalty if she is? Goodbye. Okay? So, according to Rav, a pilegesh is not given a ketubah or kiddushin. According to Shmuel, and you don't have that quote here, but Shmuel, who he often argues with, she is given a ring. There is a ceremony, but no ketubah. Right? She still is his exclusive property, but she can be sent out. Someone said, why? Help me understand. Why would any woman agree to that? She has no protection, right? She can be sent out like we saw. Abraham sent him out. The only reason why you would think that someone would want to do it is because... Thank you. If there's a case where the wife cannot produce a child, she would invite and she would pay them, either with gifts or with just, you get to live with us. Free housing, free room and board, right? If you father a child on my behalf. And I think the question of why would a woman do that assumes that women, first of all, had the choice. Sometimes they wouldn't have the choice because maybe the woman's father said, "Are you kidding? You know who just asked you to be his pilegesh? Mr. Goldstein owns the top, manufacturing company. You should be so lucky to be his concubine. You go." It also assumes she has a choice because she has other alternatives. If she needs the money or a place to live, it's better than nothing, right? And women in the ancient Israelite world needed somebody to take care of them. These are before the days of women in the workplace. Yes. Yes.
When you are counseling young couples today, do you tell them that?
When I counsel young couples, do I tell them that you're participating in a legal arrangement where he will claim ownership over you exclusively? No. In fact, I'm clear that sometimes I say that don't choose the translation of the ketubah that's the real translation. They have creative ones. What's actually interesting is that when the same-sex ceremony started becoming developed, and no one calls it a concubine ceremony, but it is a ceremony that really does come from this idea that two people could have a loving relationship with each other without the formalities of a marriage. A lot of people who heard about that, who are not same-sex couples, say, we want that ceremony. Why? Because it's a ceremony of equals. I'm in this, and I can toss you out, and you're in this, and you can toss me out. But we come to this both as equal partners. So it's fascinating the ways that some have proposed reviving concubinage. The Rambam is one of those people who doesn't like it and explains the presence of concubines in Jewish history as an exclusive domain of important people. Let's read what he says. This is really interesting. I don't know if anyone's seen this before, but this is the opening chapters of Hilchot Ishut, when he talks about the laws of relationships. Before the Torah was given, when a man would meet a woman in the marketplace and he and she decided to marry, he would bring her home, conduct relations in private, and thus make her his wife. Before the Torah was given, what was marriage? Marriage was sex. The first person that agrees to have sex with you comes to your house and you're married, bingo. Once the Torah was given, the Jews were commanded that when a man desires to marry a woman, he must acquire her as a wife in the presence of witnesses. Only after this does she become his wife. This is alluded to in Deuteronomy when a man takes a wife and has relationships with her. This process of acquisition fulfills one of the Torah's positive commandments. The process of acquiring a wife is formalized in three ways: through the transfer of money, through the transfer of a formal document, and through sexual relations. Understand what Maimonides is saying this way. I stepped into this conversation to say today the modern way is we want relationships of equals. And some want to have a relationship where they're not acquired by the other party. But according to Maimonides, the Torah's creation of this idea of Kiddushin was a step in the direction of giving rights to women. How so? Well, you couldn't just leave her or go to the next wife or send her away with gifts. The Torah says, if you want to have a wife, you need to have a formal arrangement where you promise to take care of her. There are obligations that come with marriage, and when you become husband and wife, you will be forced to consent to those obligations in front of witnesses. So marriage is to protect women. Now, we understand that this would apply in the case of maybe Abraham, because we're not told of any fancy marriage that occurred between him and his Pilegesh. They just showed up on the scene. But the marriage of Isaac that we're going to read next week, that's a more formal process. We understand that there's differences between a Pilegesh and a wife. But there's a problem here. He says after the Torah was given, you had to make a promise to take a wife. But then why are we reading after the Torah was given about the kings of Israel, supposed to be religious role models, taking on wives in other ways? Concubinage. Let's read how he explains that. The effectiveness of sexual relations and the transfer of a formal document have their origins in the Torah itself, while the origin of money is a rabbinic in origin. This process of acquisition is universally referred to as erusin or kiddushin, and a woman who is acquired in any of these three ways is referred to as mekudeshet or meureset. Right? If you're acquired by your husband, you're his property, and you even get a name associated with you. Once this process of acquisition has been formalized and a woman has become mekudeshet, she is considered to be married even though the marriage bond has not been consummated and she has not entered her husband's home. In other words, it was a Jewish invention that you can be married without sex. As long as you speak the words, Harei at mekudeshet li, behold, you are consecrated to me, in front of witnesses, it is with those words, in other words, the creation of an obligation between the two parties, a legal obligation, that you become husband and wife. Sex has nothing to do with it. Should anyone other than her husband engage in sexual relations with her, he is liable to be executed by the court. If her husband decides to divorce her, he must compose a get. With his words. Before the Torah was given, when a man would meet a woman in the marketplace and he and she desired, he could give her payment, engage in relations with her whenever they desired, and then depart. But today such a woman is referred to as a harlot. Sex without a marital commitment, obligation, is, according to the Rambam, harlotry. Today, after the Torah was given. When the Torah was given, relations with a harlot became forbidden. As Deuteronomy states, there shall not be a harlot among the children of Israel. Therefore, a person who has relations with a woman for the sake of lust, without kiddushin, receives lashes as prescribed by the Torah because he had relations with the harlot. Period. Does Maimonides allow sex before marriage? Where? Where does Maimonides allow sex before marriage? He says, absolutely not. In fact, he says, you're we're talking after the Torah was given. Does Maimonides permit sex before marriage? You're violating the Torah, according to him. You're engaging in harlotry.
But there's a different punishment.
But take a look at what the Ravid says. The Ravid comments on the Rambam and argues with him. The term harlot is only applied to someone who is paid and shares herself among many men. A woman attached to one man is not a harlot, is not lashed, and is regarded as a concubine, as we find in the Torah. The Ravid disagrees with the Rambam. The Rambam does not leave any space for non-marital relationships, but the Ravid says, is as long as she attaches herself exclusively to this man. In other words, if you're engaging in an exclusive relationship, it is permitted. And she is called his concubine. Harlotry is a woman who shares herself among many men, and that's different. Interesting how such a fundamental point, there's disagreement between two major authorities. Now we have a problem here. Does a harlot get paid? Yes, that's what the Ravid says. Someone who is paid and shares herself among many men. Now the Ravid now opens the door in a place where I think other authorities felt very uncomfortable. What the Ravid basically says is, you're allowed to have a mistress. No problem, according to the Torah. Let's look at what the Rashba says on page 3. I don't know why there's any question, this is in his responsum book called Shut HaRashba. I don't know why there's any question about the permissibility of a pelegish relationship. For she is certainly permissible because she is in an exclusive relationship with him. The Rashba says a concubine relationship is permitted as long as it is exclusive. Casual sex, after all, was not forbidden, but by the teaching of Rabbi Eliezer that a man should not have a relationship with different women in separate locations. The ban against casual sex was about not a long-term exclusive relationship, but about going around town casually. But if he brings her into his home and she is exclusively with him, and thus her children would be known to him and are called by his name, meaning they're not illegitimate, right? The understanding with the concubine relationship is, your children are my children. She is permitted. For King David engaged in such relationships, and we do not find anywhere, not in Scripture and not in the Talmud, any distinction between a king and a commoner regarding this matter, and we indeed find that the great men of Israel engaged in such relationships, and if you will argue that the judges were considered as kings, then you thereby support by your own words the permissibility of such relationships to the spiritual masters. Basically, anyone can have a concubine if they want to.
I remember one instance in the Talmud that speaks in particularly about the king, about the 18, the number 18.
Yes.
The king should not have more than 18. I think it's Masechet Sanhedrin.
I was going to say it's in Masechet Sanhedrin. Yes.
Because this is going, and horses as well.
Yes.
This is going to drive you back to Egypt.
Or it will cause his heart to become haughty, is what I remember it saying. Having too many wives is a problem because you're mimicking the practices of other nations and will cause your heart to rise above where it should be. In other words, you become arrogant with all your property and all your mistresses. And that the Jewish kings had to limit their property and their wives, but still, it doesn't ban it. The Talmud nowhere bans concubinage. In fact, according to Rav, there's a way to create such a relationship. And Rashba seems to say, there is no argument on earth. And you can't tell me that it was only for important people. It was for everybody. It gives you a sense of how Jews regarded their king. The king was a moral leader as much as he was a political leader. And if he could have a concubine, then that means everybody could have a concubine. The Radbaz says, since this generation is licentiously engaged in all kinds of forbidden sex, it is inappropriate to allow even what might be permitted in order to erect a fence around the Torah. So this is where things start to get patched up. It would certainly be inappropriate to allow what is forbidden by law, like relations between a concubine and an ordinary Jew. So the Radbaz feels that the only people who were entitled to a concubine were important people. And if you open this up and say anyone can have concubines, you're going to create a moral problem. Because this is a generation, look, even in the 16th century they're complaining, this is a generation that's engaged in all kind of forbidden sex, and even though it may be allowed, we have to make a fence around the Torah. Have you ever heard of that expression before? Make a fence around the Torah means make extra rules that are not in the Torah in order to protect the integrity of the Torah, the intent of the Torah, let's say, the core values and beliefs of the Torah. And if we understand that, according to Maimonides, to be that women are not treated as just commodities, if that's the message of the Torah, we have to stop this concubinage thing because it just gives in to a culture that already treats women as commodities.
Do you know where this rabbi lived? In what country?
It's right here, Egypt. The Radbaz is Egyptian. It's a very good question. Tell me why you're asking. Because it is a good question.
The popular customs in particular countries that might be influencing the Jewish community.
Yeah. So it seems actually that in the 18th century, the Ashkenazi and the Sephardic world had different practices when it came to concubines. The Ashkenazi Jews had concubines. That's the Ramban, Tshuvot HaRashba, Tshuvot HaRashba, if you read, it's Responsa Rashba attributed to the Ramban, so it's complicated. This is because many books were burned during the Crusades, so records of some books are found in other books. And this responsum comes from Nachmanides, even though it was found in Shut HaRashba, which is not Maimonides. Rashba, somebody else, lived in Germany. But later scholarship revealed these to not be what the Rashba would have said. They found that they were tied to the Ramban. That's why it said that these are Tshuvot HaRamban, but this is for advanced students, found in Tshuvot HaRashba. And the Shelot Yavetz at the bottom of the page curses the Ashkenazi rabbis for permitting this practice. Take a look. Regarding these rabbis who follow in the Ashkenazic customs, it would have been better had they never existed, and had they never been created in this land, for they have wrought all sorts of destructive stumbling blocks upon the people, compelling many to transgress what is indeed forbidden by the Torah in their attempts to create safeguards around what is not at all forbidden in the Torah. Can someone help me understand that sentence? What do you think that means? What's the problem with these Ashkenazi rabbis? But what's the problem they've created? They've compelled many to transgress what is indeed forbidden in the Torah in their attempts to create safeguards around what is not at all forbidden by the Torah. This is really important. What he's saying is, people have needs. And not everybody wants those needs to be satisfied by a marital relationship, which involves formalities, kedushin, ketubah. And because you're not allowing them to have a pilegesh relationship, they're doing other bad things. Do you understand? It's not what you think he means. He's not saying the Ashkenazi rabbis, you're at fault for creating the fence around the Torah. So we understand why you put a fence around the Torah. You didn't want people engaged in licentious things. But what's fascinating to me about this tshuva, if I was going to give a presentation on unintended consequences of overly stringent rulings, I would cite this Shelot Yavetz. You wanted to be really tough on people, so you got rid of the pilegesh relationship. And I know, of course, and harlotry also is banned. But look what you did in the process. People have to have their needs satisfied somewhere. And if you had made the pilegesh relationship an option, maybe people would have had, at least they would have had the dignity of their relationship preserved. He would have had to take her into her home. there would have been some formal acknowledgement of her children. They would have been something. But because you closed off the option, now these men are doing something that actually is forbidden in the Torah, which is paying for casual sex wherever you can find it. It's a fascinating look into rabbis and their sensibilities with regards to social issues. Right? They're looking at what's going on, saying, if we don't make something available for people to have loving relationships outside of marriage, it will be worse than having a concubine. Some established kind of relationship. I don't know what your thoughts about that are, but I think that's one of the things I want to leave you with is, do you agree with that? Is it better that there be some in-between option? That a man and woman can have a relationship, or I shouldn't say man and woman, it's 2022. Two people can have a relationship that is exclusive, that is not marriage, but that's also not casual. Should there be some institution like that in society? Therefore, in my opinion, it is a great mitzvah to publicize that pilagshut is permitted. Especially in this generation when the Canaanites dwell in the land who so love sexual licentiousness. He's not talking about the Canaanites. He's saying, we live in France, or where's he? In Germany, but it could be anybody. We live in Germany or France. We live in times where there's sex everywhere, and everyone's doing it. In particular, the spreading among our people of the immoral cult of Shabbat Tzvi, prince of the adulterers, which seeks the destruction of souls. We will talk about Shabbat Tzvi at another time. But there were accusations that in the cult of Shabbat Tzvi, which was a Messianic Jewish cult, there were illicit sexual things that they were doing. All the more reason for the rabbis to say, we need some legitimate kind of relationship that is an alternative to marriage. It shouldn't be black and white, there should be gray in between. So conservative rabbis love gray in between. We love when there's history and answers that open up doors in between two extremes. And I want you to think about that. The way this issue, pilagshut, when we read in the Torah about concubine and we sort of laugh it off, skip over it, don't treat it respectfully, the way maybe we should look at a concubine differently and say that a legitimate loving relationship could be created outside of formal marriage, and that it would have applications in many different areas of life. Think about an older couple where one of the spouses died, but she doesn't want to get remarried, or he doesn't want to get remarried. Maybe this is an option. Think about a same-sex couple. Think about a young couple. So today, couples are getting married very old. How old are you? 30. You're still not married. But, well, come on, that's like you and all your friends, right? Like, it's the same. So, to say what Maimonides says is ridiculous when people are getting married at 30. You can't have sex outside of marriage. It's just going to create problems. If publicly you can't be with anybody except your wife, well, you're going to get your needs fulfilled somewhere. But if I can say, no, there's something that maybe there's some holy relationship that we can create outside of marriage for younger kids, and actually talk about it. Not younger kids, that doesn't sound right. For dating, that's better. Young professionals, right? Okay. Where you could have a class maybe about this is what it means to be an exclusive relationship. And the Jewish approach is not no, but no, there's room for a committed relationship, but there are rules. And there's a big difference between a committed relationship and the harlot relationship, which is casual. I leave this to you to think over as you're having Kiddush. And maybe you want to suggest that it's time to revive concubinage. And it's not such a crazy idea. Shabbat Shalom. See you downstairs.